welcome back to another episode of Wrestling Collector Zone. Today, what I'm going to be going over is a subject on after watching through some matches, and it got me to thinking, what were the worst matches that I've seen, or let me seek out some of the worst matches that there's ever actually been. And so I wanted to do a top 3 list because I didn't want to make this video very long, but I've got a top 3 list of what I consider the top 3 worst matches that there's been, ranked upon many different factors, being straight down from the idea where the match came from, what the match is, how the match actually turned out. Was there a good idea there, or what basically just straight out factor of overall what the match really just was. And there has been some pretty horrid matches in wrestling history, as I would say at least 2 of these matches I would definitely like to forget that they ever did happen, and I don't think I'll ever watch them again, hopefully not, after rewatching them twice. But I also wanted to go over, before getting into this list, this past week had contacted someone through online and was looking at something for the giveaway box. And I was able to find a little bit of an interesting item. And what it was I found some luchador masks that are made by somebody. And they're nice little quality. They're not like pro masks, but they've got foam lining in them. Overall, like, there's at least 3 of these that I do not know which wrestler they are. I have to go over that. Okay. But this is the first one that I picked up for the giveaway. And that's going to go in the giveaway box. There's this one, which unfortunately looks like it's stained. I'm going to have to see if I can clean that up. If not, I'm going to have to recontact the person about replacing this one. But there's this one here. And it's obviously laces up in the back, just like normal masks. So there is this one here, which again, I'm not sure whose mask this is really supposed to be. But this was just one of the interesting ones they had. And then I've got one here that everyone does know, and I figured would be a good pickup, is a Rey Mysterio mask. So, figured that'd be a good pickup for a giveaway item. Figured someone out there would enjoy these. Just, maybe someone's a collector of masks, or overall would just enjoy those. And they're pretty nice. I wouldn't say high tier quality, but they're pretty high quality for what they were. So that was a nice pickup to put in there. Alright, so let's get on to the top 3. I want to start at 3 and work my way down to 1. 1 being the worst match that I think, that at least I know of, is the worst match in wrestling history. Number 3 I'm going to start with is, after doing a little bit of research, looking back on WWF, older gimmicks, stuff like that, I found a real interesting match that I don't remember. It happened in 94, so about that time I would have been 6-7 years old probably. And so I don't know if I actually had ever seen this match when I was a kid or not, but it was a quite interesting match, and all these matches on this list I watched over twice because I really wanted to decide and break down the factor of, are they truly one of the worst matches in history that I know of, and then what ranking do they deserve. And this one was number 3, mainly for the factor of, honestly, a match like this I don't think should have really ever happened, but it got number 3, being the least of the worst ones on this list, mainly because of the comedy factor of the match. It was nothing but just basically a joke, the whole match, and it was represented as a joke. It happened during WWF Survivor Series 1994. And it was the Royal Family, which consisted of Jerry the King Lawler, and he had, I don't know, it depends on what in the wrestling world, this is what they're labeled as is midget wrestlers, but if you want to call them small people or whatever, but in wrestling it's usually labeled under as midget wrestling. And he had 3 midget wrestlers on his team, which their names were Cheesy, Queasy, and Sleazy. And they represented more of, like, they were coming out of, like, the dwarfs story, is more like what they kind of played their consistency of their gimmick on. And they were put up against, their opponents were Clowns R Us. Yes, you heard that right. Clowns R Us. And of course, the leader of that team was Doink. But he had 3 midget wrestlers as well, which was one of his teammates was one that actually had wrestled in WWF a little bit longer than the other ones, I believe, that I know of anyways, because I never had heard of the other 2. But his teammates were Dink, which is a small version of Doink, and then there was Pink, which he had a red wig, and there was Wink, which he had a yellow wig. And it was just, the whole time during this match, it was just comedy happening, which, with Doink as a wrestler, his gimmick is a clown, obviously, and it's, it was more meant as comedy in general. But I think this just kind of took it a little too far. I think it's fine in wrestling to have comedy, but I don't like the fact of a whole match being nothing but comedy, because then it's just making fun of the fact of wrestling in general. And it's obviously like wrestling's not, it's sports entertainment, but when you have a whole match that's just consistent of comedy, it just makes fun of the fact of it even more so being sports entertainment. And it was, with how the match worked, it was an elimination match. So it was started off with Doink versus Jerry the King Lawler, and the Jerry the King Lawler or Doink were not allowed to wrestle against the other midget wrestlers because of size factor, is how they played it in the match. And it was just the whole time between Jerry the King Lawler and Doink, it was a comedy factor of that lasted between about 5 to 10 minutes. And the midget wrestlers running in, like running over Jerry the King Lawler or running over Doink and doing little faces like, ugh, and like, woo, sounds, it just, the whole time it was, that's what the match was. It was what it was. Honestly, it was a horrible match, but if you need a laugh, which if I ever honestly need a laugh, I'll probably go back to this match just to have a laugh, because it does make you laugh the whole time. It's just the fact of it was a horrible match that it really should have never happened. And, you know, the Royal Family versus Clowns R Us, and like the whole time of Jerry the King Lawler didn't like people chanting Burger King and the crowd and stuff, and some people were wearing the Burger King crown and everything like that because of him being Jerry the King Lawler, and they were relating to him and his team as Burger King, and it was just So that was number 3. Okay, now I'm going to go down to number 2. And number 2 happened at WWF Unforgiven. And that's the weird thing is 2 of the 3 of these matches actually happened during WWF. But I'm sure in WCW there was a lot of bad matches too. But number 2 was Big Boss Man versus Al Snow in a Kennel from Hell match. Now, what this match was consisted of the old style early 90s blue cage that was the big blue bars put around the ring. And then at this time, the Hell in the Cell had already been introduced into wrestling. And so what it was the blue cage around the ring, and then it was a Hell in a Cell around that. And then what it was that they were bringing in vicious Rottweilers to be inside the Hell in a Cell, in between the cage and the ring, so that how it was supposed to work was the winner had to escape both cages. So they had to find a way to escape the blue cage to get away from their opponent, but get past the vicious animals to make their way out of the Hell in a Cell. Now what happened with this, and I want to cut this one short, it was a complete disaster. The Rottweilers that were involved in this match, I don't know where they got them from. If they were really well trained or not, but it seemed like they weren't really as well trained as what they should have been, because what ended up happening was the whole time of the match, really, the Rottweilers were really going after each other, barking at each other, and peeing all over the mat on the outside of the ring. There was just giant puddles of pee, and from them marking their territory and stuff like that. The match, there was nothing good about it. There was nothing good that came of it. And Al Snow, the storyline even started from the fact of that, to keep it kind of short so I can jump into number 1, is that Big Boss Man had actually ground up Al Snow's dog Pepe and made him out of chili and fed it to Al Snow. Anyone that watches South Park, that's a familiar storyline, kind of. It's just with parents being ground up and put in chili. So I don't know if that's kind of where whoever was responsible for the storyline kind of got this idea for the storyline, But whoever actually came up with the storyline and the idea of the match, it was horrible from the start. Should have never happened, especially that late in the 90s. It was in 99. Alright, and let's move on to number 1. Number 1 was in WCW, and it was in 1996, and it happened at Uncensored 1996. I don't have a whole lot of the backstory because I didn't look into it that much, but it was the Mega Powers, which was Macho Man Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, versus, they named themselves Tate for short, or the Alliance to Stop Hulkamania. And it was like, they were like a stable, basically, almost. Ric Flair, Lex Luger, Kevin Sullivan, Ming, Barbarian, Arn Anderson, Z Gangsta, and Ultimate Solution. And this was the worst idea for a match ever. What it consisted of was, it was called the Doomsday Cage Match. And it was a 3-tier cage match. Literally, it had the cage itself had to be constructed on site there and placed around a different ring off to the side, because of the fact of it had to be constructed off to the side around a different ring because of the fact of it was a 3-tier cage, so it wasn't a cage that could be lifted and then brought back down because of the height of it. And it was just basically all like welded together, a pole going through the middle of it. It was one of the most unsafe matches I've seen. How they got to the top was, there was like a scaffold stairs that took you up to the top. And the idea was that the Mega Powers had to start in the top tier, the third cage on top, which was like all one piece anyways, but it was the top tier. It was the Mega Powers, and they went up against Ric Flair and Arn Anderson in this cage on the top. Now the cage, the top 2 cages literally were like tall enough. It was a little bit taller than the wrestlers, so basically just enough for them to stand. There was no room to actually do moves. There was the metal pole coming through the center to kind of secure it somewhat. And it was the floor of the actual cage, obviously, was just more cage fencing that they had to walk on. And it was like, as they walked or wrestled on it, it was almost like it was almost about to buckle. So luckily that didn't happen in any of the tiers of the cage. Literally the only thing the wrestlers could do was pretty much kind of brawl it out, punching, duking it out. And the idea was, how they progressed was, they didn't have to pin, submit, anything like that. Arn Anderson or Ric Flair, all they had to do was basically escape through the escape hatch, which was in the floor of the cage there, down to the next level. And down to the next level, there was a separation in the cage because it was supposed to separate, that there was like 2 wrestlers on one side, 2 wrestlers on the other side, that they would fight their way through this side, then fight their way through the other side, and then they would, if they escaped these against these 2 guys, they would escape into the next side and fight against the other 2 guys, and then they would have to escape that to make it down into the actual cage match itself, down into the ring. Now what happened was, once the Mega Powers escaped the top tier after like duking it out for 5-10 minutes against Ric Flair and Arn Anderson, which was awful. It was the whole time. They escaped through the hatch and went up against Ming and Barbarian. And at first, they were going against Ming and Barbarian because that's where the escape hatch went down to. But then, like, I don't know if they kind of just threw a Hail Mary next or what, but all of a sudden, Kevin Sullivan and Lex Luger just busted through the door that came into that side, and they were all four ganging up on the Mega Powers. So then they were just duking it out. But again, this same deal was that this tier, literally, there was enough room for them to stand, no room for them to do wrestling moves. They couldn't have if they wanted to, because again, the cage floor could have like buckled, honestly. And they duked it out until Hogan and Macho Man finally kind of escaped. But how they escaped was Hogan and Kevin Sullivan made their way out of the cage door on that second tier, back out onto the scaffolding, and were duking it out. And the thing of it is that which made this match even worse, and I've never been a fan of Hogan, but you look at the factor of what's happening as they're fighting on the scaffold here, is what happens next is literally Hogan's trying to push Kevin Sullivan off or throw him off the scaffold down to the floor. And this is off the second tier. Now, my problem with this is the fact of that Hogan is supposed to be still a good guy at this point. This is predates NWO, before he joined NWO. And this is when he's still that American hero, but he's doing stuff that a heel would do and not a face. And it was like, okay, it just made the match that much worse. And so they ended up making their way down. Everyone escaped the cage. And they went to, which made it even worse, was instead of going to the ring that was on the bottom of the cage, they all went to the regular ring, fighting it out. That happened for about 10, 15 minutes, something like that. And Z Gangsta and Ultimate Solution was nowhere to be found yet. And they duked it out, but then they fought their way back over again to the Doomsday cage, but then fought their way back to the regular ring again. Finally, Ultimate Solution and Z Gangsta made their way out, and they fought to the regular cage, which it was just a terrible match the whole time. And finally, the Mega Powers picked up their win, but just overall, it was a terrible match. This honestly goes down for me in history as the worst match, the worst cage match, just overall the worst match in wrestling history that I've ever seen, and a waste of time. And even more so, I watched it twice to make sure that I was giving it a fair go. So, alright, overall to recap it, number 3 was the Royal Family versus Clowns R Us, and that was at WWF Survivor Series 94. Number 2 was Kennel from Hell, Big Boss Man versus Al Snow, and that was at WWF Unforgiven 99. And then the number 1 was Doomsday Cage, and that was at WCW Uncensored. And that was the Mega Powers versus Tate, or the Alliance to Stop Hulkamania. And if you want to watch any of these matches and waste your time, I wouldn't suggest it. But if you do want to look at these matches, if you have the WWE Network, you can just go right on the WWE Network search engine, search them, and they will pop up, and go ahead and watch them. Anyways, sorry for dragging it out. I'm sure this was probably a boring video, but I just wanted to touch on the top 3 worst matches that I've seen. And make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Let me know what you think. Let me know below what you guys think are the worst matches you've seen. If you have any questions, go ahead and post and I'll reply to them. Otherwise, you guys have a great day. And this is Wrestling Collector.